Welcome to Kaiser Watch with John Kaiser. I'm your host, Jim Goddard.
John, welcome back to the show.
Jim, pleasure to be back on the show.
John, Verde Agritech had an hour-long earnings call this week, during which CEO Chris Veloso attempted to answer over 50 questions submitted by watchers. Can you give us a summary of the sort of questions asked and what kind of answers were given?
Well, Jim, this Q&A following a 20-minute discussion of the financial results for the first half of 2022, it took place Tuesday morning, and Felipe did the all the technical stuff. This presentation, both the deck and the YouTube, are now available online. So I recommend anybody who's very much into Verde Agritech to spend an hour to go through this themselves. But what I did is I went through it and took notes, and I put together a kind of summary, and this will be the only question we'll deal with today on Kaiser Watch. I want to save people some time, and maybe if they listen to my summary first and then go back and watch it, they'll pick up some additional nuances. The problem was the format. Chris Veloso ended up looking at this list of 60-plus questions that had been submitted in random order. He was clearly seeing them all for the first time, and he went through them in the sort of sequential random order. So there was a lot of repeat questions, and the other thing is some of the questions weren't articulated very well, so it was hard to figure out what exactly the question was that he was trying to answer. They fell into a number of groups, so what I'm going to do is just go through the various groups and sort of highlight what the questions were and what appeared to be his answers to them. Now, one of the ones that really struck was the status of the U.S. trading of Verde Agritech. When the redomiciling took place, the original OTC symbol ceased to work, and a lot of shareholders who are based in the U.S. and don't have access to the TSX became very concerned about what happened to their position, to their ability to see the prices, and even their ability to trade. And that's a bit of a clue that there are a lot of people who are relatively new to this stock buying game who are long Verde Agritech. The new symbol is now Victor, Norman, Peter, Kaiser, Frank, VNPKF, and it has started trading again. Apparently some brokerage firms haven't yet set things up so that you can see this online and do a trade, but this is getting resolved. As part of the trading question, there was also the question of, are you going to get a proper U.S. listing rather than this intermediary called the OTC Bulletin Board, and which basically arbitrages between where the real market is, which is the TSX, and the people trying to trade it through their discount brokers. And Chris Veloso did indicate they are working on a NASDAQ listing application. He did not give any details about when this will happen. I suspect it won't be until at least September. There's also a question about are you going to do a stock split to include liquidity? And his answer was no. There was also a question about are you going to start paying dividends? And this is something that personally I think would be a very bad idea. This is a growth company that still has to demonstrate that its alternative potash will be adopted on a very large scale by Brazilian farmers, and it has a very ambitious goal of ultimately representing over 50% of potash consumption by the Brazilian farming community. And to start paying dividends this early in the game, when they have like $9 million in loans out there being charged 12-13%, I think that would be silly to start kicking back money, especially since the later questions revolved around what is actually your profit margin going to be. We have fuel costs as a dynamic. We have exchange rates, fluctuating exchange rates. Do you think you'll have all this surplus cash flow to pay out as dividends? So I'm hopeful that, and he indicated that they will make a decision on their dividend strategy in a few months. I'm hoping that the answer is going to be no, we are not going to do this. There was a couple of hostile questions about his decision to start selling stock, and this was also in conjunction with another question that was critical of his social media strategy of marketing the company. And they said, this doesn't really work. You're selling stock, and at the same time you're promoting the stock. This kind of looks like a classic pump and dump. And his response was that the amount of money that the company spends on social media marketing is relatively small compared to other companies' budgets. And there is also the fact that the program that he's got going is now a mechanical automatic program that's systematic. He's not in charge of it. It is done automatically, and it's just part of his planning. And he indicated that there were some people who said, yes, we're glad you're doing this. This is the professional thing to do. This is the serious companies do. So we're happy about this. And one of the things that he mentioned was there was a question about smart money. When is it going to start coming into the stock? And that question mentioned BlackRock, and his response was kind of curious. And I think it answers something that I've been asking myself. To what extent does Verde Agritech, even though it's like a $5 to $10 stock right now, to what extent does it have an institutional shareholder base? And his response was kind of odd. He said that in the many years that he's talked to hundreds, thousands of investors of all kinds, from retail to institutions, he found that many of the so-called sophisticated smart money fund managers are less sophisticated than the shareholders that Verde Agritech has ended up with. And I think that's kind of a hint that the audience, the shareholder base, is still largely a sort of sophisticated retail audience. Maybe family office types have moved into the stock, but the real institutional crowd has not yet moved in. The stock was never really pitched to the Canadian Bay Street crowd, which is probably a good thing. And the U.S. institutional crowd, I think they're going to wait until we have the U.S. Listing, the proper U.S. listing, and then they can buy and sell this easily. There'll be much greater liquidity. And I think this will coincide also with the answer to, I think, what was the most pressing question asked over and over again. And that is the timing of when will Plant 2, at least phase 1 of it, 1.2 million extra tons per annum on top of 600,000 they already have installed. When is this going to happen? And originally people hoped it would be at the start of the third quarter in July. It's now mid-August. And the guidance is really placed on selling a lot of product in that critical window, July through October. And so now we're halfway through August, and they're still only producing from the existing plant 1 setup. And he still insisted that we've got a couple of weeks left. We do think we will be commissioning before the end of this month. And this, I think, is the big thing hanging over the market, because in order for them to meet their 1 million ton guidance of sales in or output production for 2022, they need to have this going by September, because a big chunk of demand will take place in September, October. There will still be orders in November, December, but it will not be as intense. So this is the question most people are looking for. We're hoping to hear in early September that yes, we are operational. That will allow them to produce 300 to 400,000 tons of product, K Forte, during this period. And then the question will be, okay, if you have the capacity in place, will you continue to be able to get the order? So that was another important question is, okay, in fact, one of the questions went in the opposite direction and said, why are you only guiding 2 million tons for 2023 when your capacity is 3 million tons? And to which he had the sensible answer that, we're going from, a potential 600,000 to 3 million tons in a relatively short period. Nothing ever works very smoothly. And I think that was that's been the issue with the, getting plant to operational. Along the way, they made the decision, the potential orders are so strong. Let's do the phase 2 also. And it seems like the phase 2, the full 2.4 million, will be operational not long after the 1.2 million is operational. And that created the interesting question of, okay, so if you have all of a sudden all this capacity, how are you going to sell? And somebody asked a question about Nutrien purchasing this company, Casa do Adubo, which is a retail fertilizer company that sells to a lot of the smaller farmers, and they were wondering what the implications for Verde Agritech was. And Chris Veloso's response was, well, they do not distribute any material for us, so at this stage it makes no difference. But nobody asked the question. He didn't mention about the deal announced Tuesday morning, which is a distribution deal with a company called Lavoro, which is, I think, going to make a big difference to help them move product. Now, the also interesting thing that he brought up was the question of timing of orders. So there were questions that were asking about the farmers tend to place their, are very happy to place orders in advance, and if the price is good, and definitely take delivery if the price is higher. But also, when the price is higher, they tend to wait until the last minute. And there's also this problem in Brazil where if you contract to deliver at, say, $600 KCL equivalent, if it's like $1,000 at the time, you definitely have to honor that deal as a supplier. But if the shoe is on the other foot and they've contracted for $1,000 equivalent and the price has dropped to $600, it seems that the contracts in Brazil farming sector are not so binding, so the supplier and the farmer have to negotiate some sort of compromise. And a whole group of questions sort of revolved, people who did the math and said, well, if the KCL equivalent price was $1,000 to $1,300 a ton of conventional KCL, and we're using an approximate multiplier of 6 to 1 to figure out what your equivalent price is. Your equivalent price that you're selling at is considerably lower. Why is the price that you're getting for K Forte lower than what we know was the price during the first half of 2022? And the answer to that was he's finally given out numbers as to some of the discounts they are offering. For example, indirect selling through a distributor involves a 15% discount, with the distributor paying 15% less than what the distributor resells the product, K4 product, through their network. Whereas the agents, the direct agents, they collect a 5% commission of whatever it is that they sell. And what's been happening in the first half is there were a lot of pre-orders at different price ranges, so that what it's averaging out at is not the spot price. But Chris Veloso did, in response to related questions, indicated that there has been a shift in the farm community to placing their orders early to being holding off, waiting. So we have seen the KCL CIF prices peak in Brazil. When I talked to Chris last week, he said apparently it's around $800 right now. That's still above their average price and well above the assumptions they used in their feasibility study, and still well above what their guided profit price is for 2022. But he says the one thing that's kind of helping them with having not as rapid a commissioning of plant 1 or plant 2 is that the farmers, across the board, whether it's for KCL or K4, have been holding off with their orders in the hope that prices will come down. So they are running out of time, and there's going to be a surge of orders, probably a bigger surge during this window, this traditional selling window, than there has historically been. Which goes back to the question: are they on top of the installation and construction? Is this thing ready? It's not like you do a renovation on your house and you get 90% of it done, and 10% of the time to get the whole thing done. So you're just stuck with this, almost finished house. You just live with it. With a plant like this, you can't operate it with 90% complete. It has to be totally complete to be operational. So again, this question of how close are you to actually being able to start plant 2 construction is a really important question. The other issue relates to the earnings. People are concerned about one of the slides, the reason why in the second quarter the earnings was lower than guided is because the diesel price, which is driven by spot price and therefore affects transportation, which is a key part of the cost of delivering K-Forte to the product, that was in an uptrend during the second quarter, and that eroded some of the profitability that they had projected. However, the diesel prices have been declining since July, and anybody who's watching the oil price can see that for now at least there is downward pressure on the oil price. And he did point out that if we're going to be stuck with higher fuel costs across the board, this also impacts the landed cost of KCL, conventional KCL coming from Russia, Belarus, or Canada, and they also have their local distribution costs, the transportation costs. It's they're moving 1/6 the volume, but those costs will also keep the price of KCL from collapsing back to $250. And he pointed out that back when KCL was $250, they were still making money selling it at the time. Though of course at the time the fuel costs were considerably lower. There were a bunch of questions about Biorevolution and the BAX products. And the BAX products is K-Forte that's been supplemented with various nutrients, micronutrients, such as sulfur. It's a customization. The growth in that has not been significant because the priority with the existing capacity has been to move the basic K-Forte product to the farmers. But once Plant 2 is operational, the BAX products should start to be able to be sold more aggressively because the capacity to do so will be there. He did say that they have started Biorevolution, and Biorevolution is basically BAX with microbes added to it. He indicated that they are now adding more. They're able to add more than just one type of microbe, and he was really emphasizing, but very briefly, about how Biorevolution is going to be a smart platform. He compared it to your smartphone, but that didn't make a lot of sense to me. But I did understand this concept of being able to assess a farmer's particular needs and create a precise blend designed to serve that need. And there was a sort of related question talking about whether are you selling through blenders or are you selling your product directly to farmers. And he pointed out that the smaller farmers tend to use blender products, whereas the larger farms, they buy all their individual inputs by themselves and mix them according to their own needs because they have the internal infrastructure to do so. But the interesting sort of information technology aspect of Biorevolution is that Verde Agritech will be able to do this on a much smaller scale, customizing for the companies. There was a question about competition from the Amazon basin potash fields. There's Brazil Potash, Stan Vardy's company, which is trying to develop a resource like this. There's likely huge abundance of evaporite beds, sylvite beds, similar to Saskatchewan, deep in the Amazon basin. And what prompted these questions was that Petrobras has apparently been offering licenses or rights to sale for the potash rights. And Chris Veloso's response to this was access or availability of title has never been an issue. The problems are different. He didn't go into the details because he doesn't want to, rile up the conventional potash people who want to develop the Amazon basin. But for anybody who's watching this, it's clear that the indigenous people that are in the Amazon basin are concerned of the impact. And there is the question of there's going to be a lot of salt water produced in dealing with these deep beds, and where is it going to end up? If it ends up in the Amazon, that could be a huge problem. So the whole environmental lobby is lined up against this issue. Now, there was a question about Verde Agritech's capacity to harness carbon credits, and Chris's response was that they have not really looked at this in any detail because they've been busy just getting Plant 2 up and running and making sure that once it's running, they're going to have the sales for the product, and also developing the more technology-oriented variations of K Forte, such as Biorevolution. But he did point out that he's come across an example of a phosphate company which is selling its product in the form of carbon credits. And he said, this looks very interesting, and it may have application for the K Forte product in some sort of complex way down the road. And the virtue of K Forte is that as a silicate form of potash, it doesn't pound the soil with all the salts that are liberated when potassium is absorbed from potassium chloride, and these salts have a tendency to kill the biosphere and its ability to pack carbon away. So indirectly, K Forte is seen as a carbon dioxide reduction system, and maybe they can package this up in some form and sell carbon credits. And there was one question which Tuesday morning I thought was kind of dumb. It was like, are you guys watering the trees that you are planting on the quarry, the Verde, the glauconite quarrying that you've done? And Chris' response, well, yes, of course. During the dry season, we make sure that these newly planted trees where we've mined out the Verde. Verdeci slate, we are definitely making sure that they are thriving, and of course we are required to do this. And on Wednesday, I saw the Financial Times had one of its big reads, which takes the whole page, and it was all about the Brazilian Cerrado, their word for savanna, and that's basically the sort of southern third of Brazil, and that's where all the agricultural activity is, and all the environmental attention always goes to the Amazon basin, the lungs of the earth, which suck the carbon dioxide out of the air and pack it back into wood mass. But the southern part has an awful lot of vegetation, and it has been likened to an upside down Amazon due to the big root systems. And there's been a growing concern about the flourishing agribusiness, the agriculture in this southern part. Now, this, of course, is the emerging breadbasket for the world, and various environmentalists have sounded the alarm that they are deforesting too much of this area. And another thing that's happening is that indirectly they're replacing cattle grazing areas with planting soybeans, and the cattle are being moved into the Amazon, where the illegal logging and clearing is wiping out trees indirectly to accommodate fields that used to be grazing fields in the savanna. And so this is now becoming an issue. There are rules in place to make sure that the Brazilians are not stupid. They don't want their environment wrecked. But there's also concern that some of these rules aren't being watched very carefully. So the question, although it applied to the tiny footprint that's only growing incrementally, may seem dumb just by itself, but it was probably guided by an awareness of this bigger deforestation problem that is affecting the savanna, and for which there may need to be ways figured out using carbon credits and things like that to provide an offset, so that in the hurry to feed the world, we don't make the global warming problem worse. And the final sort of topic, it was actually came up relatively early. It was a kind of a convoluted political question which asked two things. One, it alluded to what are we going to see an American stop the steal type of situation in October if the current president, Jair Bolsonaro, loses the election, and he's currently trailing Lula da Silva by 10 points or so. Who knows what it will be in a few months? But he's being consulted by Donald Trump's kids on how to stop the steal. It's that same lie about if you lose, that means it wasn't a fair loss. And the question is, if he loses and declares this a rigged election, and the boots march into the street, what will that do for the country's economy? Are we looking at a civil war? Well, Chris Veloso pretty much avoided this question because he obviously hopes this is not going to happen, and he privately thinks that it wouldn't happen, but he doesn't really want to stir that pot. But the other part of the question is, what is the nationalization risk? And Lula da Silva comes more from the left side, but Jair Bolsonaro on the right side has also kind of talked about, we need to nationalize some of these resources. And his response was that the history of Brazil is that the governments have pretty much left resources in the hands of the private sector. The oil system's a separate category because it's primarily offshore. But all the other sort of hard rock resources, they've never meddled with that. And he points out that Lula was president for 8 years, and we already know what his strategy is, so it's unlikely that he's going to suddenly want to nationalize the country's resources. And Bolsonaro, even though he mouthed off about it before he was elected, he hasn't actually done anything in this regard, so that if he is reelected, either of them reelected, he does not see any sort of expropriation risk, nationalization risk related to the Verde slate, the basis for the K4. So that's kind of a summary. I do encourage people to go watch it for themselves. Hopefully I've given you some sort of background which will enable you to filter more pieces out, more details out of his conversation. But the key takeaways are, we need to hear that Plant 2 is operational by September, and that it works smoothly. And then we need to see evidence that it is producing at capacity with a product being sold and delivered to farmers. And those are the key things that the market will be watching over the next month. And then we'll be watching for a NASDAQ listing actually coming through. And if Verde Agritech can have Plant 2 up and running and making sales through its new Lavarosa distribution relationship, which by the way, that will likely reduce the profit margin, but at the same time they are getting economies of scale through the larger throughput capacity of Plant 2. So overall, it was a very interesting Q&A. You had to pay hard attention to understand what the question was and what the answer was. And I'm sure there's plenty of questions people would also like to have asked. But I think I've pulled the key concerns, the key questions out, and hopefully provided a decent summary to enable our Kaiser Watch audience to understand what the future holds for Verde Agritech.
John, thanks for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
We've been talking with John Kaiser. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Kaiser Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as a recommendation to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at kaiserresearch.com.